You set a goal with complete conviction. The vision is clear, the motivation undeniable. You take the first steps with certainty that this time will be different. Then weeks pass, and the momentum that felt so solid begins to dissolve. Excuses accumulate like dust on a shelf you stop noticing. You find yourself back where you started, staring at the gap between intention and reality, wondering what happened. This pattern repeats across years, different goals, identical outcome. You blame circumstances, timing, the failures of others, but the real obstacle lives much closer than any of these external factors. Today we are exploring self-sabotage and why you abandon goals precisely when progress matters most. We'll examine 3 patterns that keep you locked in cycles of near success and perpetual restart, drawing from Marcus Aurelius on discipline, Neville Goddard on identity, and Epictetus on control. Near the end, we'll practice a revision technique to rewrite one sabotage moment from your past. If you're driving, save the meditation for later. Self-sabotage rarely announces itself. It happens quietly, through accumulated small choices. You miss the workout that becomes a missed week, then a month of irregular effort that dissolves into complete abandonment. You postpone the difficult conversation day after day until the connection fractures from accumulated silence. You abandon the creative project that began with fire, letting it die slowly through neglect rather than conscious choice. Each instance arrives with what feels like reasonable justification: exhaustion from work demands, family obligations pulling attention elsewhere, circumstances that genuinely seemed beyond your control. But underneath these surface rationales lies something more fundamental. You're protecting something your subconscious values more than the goal itself. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that the obstacle is often ourselves, that the thing standing between you and what you want lives inside your own mind rather than in any external circumstance. He faced this as emperor, surrounded by advisors, yet still recognizing that his greatest battles were internal, fought in the territory of his own assumptions and habitual patterns of thought. Neville Goddard taught that you manifest from your current state, your current sense of who you are. When you occupy the state of someone who falls short, who almost succeeds but never quite arrives, that state becomes the lens through which you experience reality. The goal threatens this familiar identity. Sabotage preserves it, keeps you safely within the boundaries of who you've always been. Your subconscious operates exactly as designed in this protection, keeping you safe from the unknown territory of becoming someone you've never been. Consider the goal you keep abandoning. What would success actually require you to become? Perhaps success means visibility, people watching, attention you're uncertain you can handle, the protective anonymity of being overlooked, dissolving into exposure. Perhaps it means higher standards, expecting more from yourself and others, the comfortable groove of settling replaced by the friction of constant growth. Perhaps it means responsibility, others depending on you, weight you're unsure you can carry. Some part of you registers this future version as dangerous territory. The person you'd need to become feels unknown, heavy with obligations you've never carried. Staying small, despite its limitations, feels safer than venturing into that unfamiliar identity. So you sabotage. The alarm sounds at 5 a.m., and you hit snooze while telling yourself you're exhausted. The real resistance is to becoming the person who rises before dawn, who treats their body and time as sacred, who acts like someone whose life matters. That person feels like a stranger you're not ready to inhabit. Epictetus taught that we sabotage by confusing what's in our control with what lies beyond it. We fixate on circumstances beyond our reach, while the one thing we can actually control, our own response, gets ignored or dismissed as insufficient. Neville taught that sabotage comes from imagining the struggle rather than the fulfillment. You picture the effort required, the potential for failure, the exhausting climb ahead. You never actually inhabit the state of the person who already succeeded. So you remain trapped in patterns that confirm what you already believe about yourself and your limitations. The mechanism runs invisibly beneath conscious awareness. Once you see it clearly, everything becomes possible to change. You launch with extraordinary intensity. Week 1 is flawless. Consistency feels effortless. Discipline comes naturally. Every action aligns with your stated intention. You're convinced this time genuinely is different, that you've finally accessed the version of yourself who follows through. Week 2 arrives, and the novelty begins to wear thin. The actions that felt energizing now require conscious effort. What was easy becomes labor. By week 3, you've missed more days than you've shown up. By week 4, the goal has been quietly abandoned, filed away with all the other attempts that started with fire and ended in familiar disappointment. This happens because you built the entire structure on motivation rather than identity. Motivation is temporary fuel, a feeling that by its nature fluctuates and fades. When the feeling burns out, action stops automatically because there was never anything else holding the structure together. Marcus Aurelius operated on principle, on a clear understanding of who he was and what that identity required of him. He wrote that discipline means doing what needs doing regardless of how you feel, that the disciplined person acts from identity rather than checking their emotional state before moving. That's the fundamental shift required. You're becoming the kind of person for whom certain actions are natural expressions of identity rather than heroic acts of will. Neville called this living in the end. You imagine yourself as someone whose body is trained, for whom movement is as natural as breathing. You inhabit the state of someone who simply does what they do without internal negotiation. The pattern breaks when identity shifts, long before motivation returns or proves itself reliable. Here is how to catch yourself mid-fade. When resistance rises, take a pause. Simply ask one question. Who would I be if this felt natural? Spend 30 seconds inhabiting that identity. See yourself moving through the action with ease. Feel what it's like to be that version where the action flows naturally. This is state shifting. You're stepping into the identity that makes the action effortless because there's no gap between who you are and what you're doing. Marcus practiced this every morning. He asked what the emperor does, what principles guide the emperor's actions. Then he embodied those principles regardless of his emotional state. The second pattern carries a particular cruelty. You get close, genuinely close in a way that previous attempts never reached. You can see the finish line with clarity. You've invested months of consistent effort. The goal that once felt distant now sits within reach, almost tangible. Then you pull back. You delay the final step, finding reasons that feel legitimate to wait just a little longer, never quite crossing into completion. This feels like terrible luck, like the universe conspired against you at the worst possible moment. Luck, however, plays no role here. Fear does. Success means visibility, people watching, judging, forming opinions about your work that you can't control. It means responsibility, the weight of others depending on you to maintain what you've achieved. The struggling version of you is known territory, familiar ground you've walked for years. The successful version remains a stranger. How they handle pressure, judgment, or the expectations that come with achievement remains unknown territory. So right at the edge, in that moment before crossing the threshold, you sabotage just enough to stay in the familiar struggle rather than venture into unknown success. Neville taught that this happens because you're imagining from fear rather than fulfillment. You picture the moment of success and feel the terror of exposure, the vertigo of actually getting what you claim to want. Your subconscious protects you by keeping success perpetually at arm's length. The solution combines revision with assumption. First, revise the almost moment. Take the most recent time you pulled back before completion. Replay it in your mind with complete clarity. See the moment. Feel the resistance. Acknowledge what happened without judgment. Now replay it differently. See yourself finishing. See yourself crossing the line, completing the final step. Feel the completion in your body. Let it become vivid and specific. Repeat this revision until the new version feels more real than the original. This is pattern interruption at the level where patterns actually live, in the subconscious recording of what you've done before and what you're likely to do again. Second, assume the identity of someone who completes things, someone who crosses finish lines as naturally as they breathe. Neville taught that assumption, when truly embodied, hardens into fact. When you assume you're the kind of person who finishes what they start, your actions begin aligning automatically with that assumption. Marcus wrote that we become what we repeatedly do, that character is built through action. Practice completion with small things that don't carry heavy emotional weight. Finish the email you've been drafting. Finish the chapter you're reading. Each completion, no matter how minor, rewires the pattern at a neurological level. Each finish strengthens the identity of someone who follows through when the end approaches. Eventually, through accumulated completions, the almost moment stops being a crisis point. It becomes just another step in a process you know you'll finish. The third pattern operates with particular insidiousness because it masquerades as honest assessment. You miss the goal. Within moments, your mind constructs an explanation that places responsibility elsewhere. The timing was wrong. You started just as unexpected demands emerged. The circumstances failed to align. Someone else failed you. Their promises proved empty. Their support disappeared when you needed it most. These explanations often contain genuine truth. Circumstances do matter. Timing genuinely affects outcomes. Other people do fail to deliver what they promised. The world operates according to forces far larger than individual desires. But here's the trap concealed within these true observations. When you focus entirely on external factors, you surrender the only power you actually possess. You make yourself helpless, dependent on circumstances aligning before you can succeed. Victims survive, accumulate grievances, and wait endlessly for conditions to improve. Epictetus taught the dichotomy of control with a precision that remains startling 2,000 years later. Some things lie within your sphere of influence. Some things lie beyond it. Wisdom lives in knowing the difference and acting accordingly. If this episode is resonating with you, take a brief moment to subscribe. I would also love to hear from you in the comments. Thank you. You can't control timing or other people's choices, or even circumstances that emerge from complex systems far larger than individual will. But you can control your response to any situation. You can control the effort you bring. And you can control how you interpret what's happening. Sabotage happens when you focus entirely on what's outside your control and ignore or dismiss what's within it. You missed the workout because exhaustion overwhelmed you. But was sleep truly outside your control? Or did you stay up scrolling through content that added nothing to your life? You avoided applying for the opportunity because the timing felt off. But was timing outside your control, or were you avoiding the possibility of rejection? This is about reclaiming power by recognizing where it actually lives, which is in the choices you make rather than the circumstances you face. Neville taught that the outer world reflects your inner state, that your assumptions about yourself and reality create the lens through which you interpret everything that happens. If you occupy the state of someone who faces bad timing, or as someone who gets let down by others, then that becomes your consistent experience. Your assumptions determine what you notice, what you ignore, and how you respond to what arrives. Marcus Aurelius faced circumstances far beyond anyone's control. Plague swept through Rome, killing thousands. Wars erupted on distant borders. Betrayal emerged from his inner circle. He couldn't change any of these realities through will alone, but he could change his response. He could focus ruthlessly on what was his to do, his choices in each moment, his discipline in maintaining principles regardless of external chaos. That's the fundamental shift. Stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" as though you're the passive recipient of events. Start asking, "What can I do with this?" as though you're an active agent shaping outcomes through choice. Let's practice together. Find a comfortable position. Close your eyes if that feels right. Take a slow breath in and release it fully. Bring to mind one recent moment where you sabotaged yourself. Something small, a goal you abandoned, a step you avoided, a moment you pulled back. See it clearly, without judgment, just observation. Now identify the pattern. Ask yourself, did you start strong and fade? Did you blame circumstance? Let the answer surface naturally. Now we're going to revise it. Replay that same moment. This time, see yourself continuing. See yourself finishing. See yourself taking full responsibility. Make it specific. What would you have done differently? Let this revised version become vivid. See it. Feel it. Let your mind accept it as something that could have happened. Now take it further. Imagine yourself tomorrow facing a similar moment. This time, you follow through. You act from the identity of someone who completes what they begin. What does that version of you do? How do they move through the day? Feel what it's like to inhabit that identity. Replay that scene one more time. Let it settle into your mind as the new pattern. When you're ready, take a deep breath. Gently open your eyes. The pattern you just revised is available to you right now. The person who acts without sabotage lives in you already. They emerge when you stop protecting the old version. Self-sabotage is a protection mechanism. You're protecting an identity, a story about who you are, a version of yourself that feels safe even when it's severely limiting. The way out is becoming someone for whom sabotage no longer serves a purpose. Someone whose identity has shifted enough that the old patterns simply don't fit anymore. Willpower exhausts itself through constant effort, while identity transformation runs automatically. Marcus Aurelius, Neville Goddard, Epictetus, they taught versions of the same fundamental truth. You are what you assume yourself to be. The moment you assume a different identity with sufficient conviction, your actions shift to match without requiring constant conscious effort. Start small. Catch one sabotage moment this week. Simply see it clearly, revise it using the technique we practiced, and step into the version of yourself who acts differently. One moment of choosing differently, then another, then another. Eventually, through accumulated small shifts, the old pattern loses its grip entirely. You realize sabotage was just the last defense of an identity you've outgrown, a protective mechanism that's no longer needed once you've become someone capable of handling success. If you just practiced the revision technique with me, drop a comment below and tell me which pattern you revised. I'd love to know what shifted for you. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.